So the ghost finally left footprints, and the world as they knew it was never the same again. Until that moment, you had been an anomaly wrapped in silence, a shadow inside a shadow, moving through the machinery of the world without disturbing the gears. You existed in whispers, in anomalies of surveillance data, in inexplicable reports that were quickly buried in classified archives. But when the illusion finally cracked, when you stepped beyond the camouflage of normalcy you had so carefully woven around yourself, the ripple was not just a disturbance, it was an earthquake that rattled the foundations of their most sacred institutions. The Pentagon, that cathedral of order, of structure, of pre-calculated responses to every terror mankind could imagine, felt the tremor first. For decades, they had prepared for everything: nuclear Armageddon, cybernetic collapse, biochemical warfare, alien contact, even rehearsals for total planetary blackout. They built layers of defense, sealed chambers, fortified blueprints upon blueprints, redundancy folded into redundancy. Every disaster, every nightmare, every apocalypse, categorized, cataloged, accounted for. They had everything, except you. Because what are protocols against something that refuses to fit the definition of threat or ally, weapon or shield? What are rules against a presence that doesn't ask permission to exist? You weren't an entry in a manual. You weren't a variable in their equations. You were the unspoken margin note they had avoided for decades, the unsolvable cipher they thought best left in rumor. And then suddenly, without warning, you walked into their spotless halls of certainty, alive, undeniable, and absolutely unpermitted. The immaculate walls of steel and discipline did not simply contain you, they bent under the weight of your existence. A truth had breached the fortress without lifting a weapon, without triggering a single alarm. You. That is why the officer, the decorated one, whose entire spine was built on rules, whose veins ran with chain of command, whose very existence was an oath to order, said not impossible, not unbelievable, but the word that betrayed the entire system: illegal. A word not about what could or could not happen, but about what was allowed to happen. And what you carried, what you embodied, was not allowed. It did not fit into their chain of authority, their flowcharts of approval, their sanctioned distribution of power. You were not documented, you were not authorized, and that, in their sacred house of legality and protocol, was the ultimate violation. And in that instant, the temperature of the room changed. Silence fell heavy, like concrete pressing against the chest. 23 of the most seasoned, battle-hardened operators in the world, men and women who had stared into infernos of war, who had kept steady while nations bled, shifted their stance. Their bodies didn't retreat in fear, not exactly. They moved because something deeper than fear spoke to them. Recognition. The kind of recognition that doesn't happen in the mind, but in the bones, in the marrow, in the oldest instincts of survival. They had seen power before, wielded it, been scarred by it. They had dissected enemies and measured force in every form it took. But this wasn't power in the way they understood it. This was not a weapon. This was not a strategy. This was being. You weren't trying. That was the part that broke them. You weren't posturing. You weren't flexing. You weren't demonstrating. You were simply existing. This was you at 2% capacity on a Tuesday afternoon, barely conscious of the energy radiating off your presence. And yet, that sliver of your essence was enough to fracture their understanding of human limitation, like glass smashing on concrete. Their manuals became worthless, their hierarchies meaningless. Their confidence in the system evaporated in an instant. They were forced to confront a terrifying truth. The most dangerous entity in the room was not armed, not sanctioned, not even particularly interested in proving anything. The most dangerous entity in the room was you, breathing, uncontained, unlicensed, undeniable. And in the echo of that realization, every line in their rulebook turned to ash. The reports are still classified, but even the word classified collapses under the weight of what they contain. These files don't sit neatly in the same vaults as stolen nuclear schematics or satellite intelligence. They exist in a stratum above secrecy itself, a vault within a vault, where the rules of bureaucracy break down. Top secret was a language for ordinary threats, wars, weapons, espionage. But you are not an ordinary threat. You were an intrusion into reality itself, something too destabilizing to be documented in the same categories as anything else they'd encountered. So they had to invent new classifications, levels of restriction so obscure that even the officials who stamp documents top secret. Every day we'll never know these exist. But the new classifications are only an illusion of control, a way to pretend that what they saw can be contained by ink and language. It cannot. Because the truth is, those reports don't describe something external. They describe you. And the truth of you resists containment. Let's talk then about what you really are. Not what they told you to be in classrooms and workplaces, not what society tried to squeeze you into with roles and ranks and little polite labels. Strip it all away, the masks, the posturing, the rehearsed performance of normalcy. And what remains is not gifted, because gifts can be given or taken. It is not talent, because talent can be studied, duplicated, industrialized. You are not the product of training or the beneficiary of blessing. You are something else entirely. You are the error in their code, the crack in their dam, the mutation in their carefully engineered breeding program of mediocrity. You are nature's flex, the universe showing off, a reminder that evolution is not finished and that progress does not wait for permission from institutions. You are the unexpected variable that proves the entire equation of their world was wrong. They had been studying human potential for decades, perhaps longer. Billions poured into black budgets hidden under innocuous names, entire facilities dug into deserts and mountains, the brightest minds chained to projects that never saw daylight. They mapped the genome, spliced strands of DNA, tested neural enhancements, and built technologies to turn men into weapons. They spoke of super soldiers, enhanced operatives, augmented assets. They convinced themselves they were creating the future. But then you walked in, without enhancements, without implants, without millions of dollars invested in your existence. You, raw and unfiltered, stood there and did effortlessly what their enhanced prototypes couldn't achieve on their best day under perfect conditions. And in that moment, the lie cracked. They realized they weren't looking at a preview of what might come. They were staring at the very thing they had spent decades trying to suppress. Their apex predators, their elite warriors, their prized operatives, all of them became obsolete in the presence of someone who wasn't even trying. And that was the detail that hollowed them out the most. You didn't break a sweat. You didn't even notice. What was breathing to you was extinction to them. Of course, they brought in the specialists. It was inevitable. At first, they tried subtlety. Observations masked as casual conversation, tests disguised as routine evaluations, questions framed as harmless curiosity. But you knew. And still, you humored them. Psychologists tried first, eager to unravel the mechanics of your perception. 3 sessions in, one quit outright, saying your mind wasn't operating on familiar frequencies at all. It wasn't just sharper or faster. It was tuned to dimensions of thought human consciousness was not supposed to access. Then came the physicist, eager, arrogant, ready to disprove rumor with equations. He left with hollow eyes, muttering fragments of theories he could no longer make sense of. Undone by the way you casually bent principles he had spent his life proving immutable. The biologist fared no better. He stared at your test results until his lips cracked into a whisper. This violates everything we know. And then there was the combat instructor, the hardened veteran with 3 decades of scars, who had trained assassins on 6 continents and written doctrines that entire militaries had adopted. He watched you move for 10 minutes, silent the whole time, before closing his notebook and saying the 5 words that ended his career. We can't counter this. And still they tried. Machines built to track every tremor of movement failed to follow your patterns. Algorithms trained to predict behavior collapsed under the weight of your decisions. They wanted to believe you were outside their box, but you weren't outside it. You were proof the box was never real. Through it all, you just smiled. Not the arrogant smile of someone intoxicated by superiority. Not the proud smile of someone reveling in their own myth. It was quieter than that. More dangerous than that. The smile of someone who already knew what they were only now beginning to discover, that you never operated under their rules because you were never meant to. And that truth, once seen, could not be unseen. That is what real power looks like. Not the kind that comes from rank or wealth or the barrel of a weapon, but the kind that forces seasoned generals to pace their offices at 3 a.m., staring at reports that should not exist, wondering how to fight something they cannot categorize, cannot contain, and cannot reproduce. They have seen anomalies before, psychics, remote viewers, subjects whose abilities bent the edges of normal. But those anomalies had limits, clear boundaries, measurable ceilings. They could be boxed, trained, slotted into chains of command. You are no anomaly. You are a category unto yourself, a walking violation of the laws they believed defined human potential. And the worst part, the part that keeps them awake, is this. They cannot replicate you. They cannot copy what was never engineered. You are unrepeatable, unscalable, uncontainable. You are singular. Damn how they've tried, how desperately, obsessively, endlessly they've tried. Genetic screening, environmental analysis, psychological profiling, endless batteries of tests designed to pull apart the threads of your life and reweave them into a pattern they could understand. They sifted through your childhood, dissected your habits, scrutinized every teacher's note and every medical record, interviewed people you barely remembered knowing, all in the hope of finding the moment, the inciting event, the catalyst that turned you into this. But here's the piece they will never grasp, the truth that keeps slipping through their trembling fingers, no matter how tightly they close their fists. You didn't become anything. There was no transformation, no secret training montage, no chemical accident, no clandestine program. You didn't emerge from a lab. You didn't rise from their systems. You simply stopped pretending to be less than what you always were. All those years of dimming your light, of shrinking yourself to fit their frames, of letting them believe you were just another nameless, faceless unit in the machinery of mediocrity. You weren't hiding your power. You were shielding them from it. You were protecting their fragile systems from shattering under the weight of what you could really do. And the day you stopped protecting them, the day you let just the faintest sliver of your true capacity bleed into the world, that was the day their world ended. They'll never say it out loud, but it's the truth. The moment you stopped holding back was the moment history split in half. Their world before you, and the new one you began, the second you exhaled unfiltered. They still have the footage, grainy, distorted, locked away in vaults so secure that even speaking of their existence constitutes a federal crime. Men with more medals than chest space still wake in the middle of the night sweating from dreams of that footage, dreams where they see it play again in infinite loop. You want to know why that officer, that decorated man with his rigid spine and rehearsed authority, didn't whisper impossible or unbelievable, but instead muttered the word illegal. Because in their meticulously ordered world, power isn't supposed to be wild. It's supposed to be domesticated, measured, registered, funneled through channels and hierarchies, restrained by laws and protocols. Power that doesn't respect the structure isn't just frightening, it's treasonous. What you revealed didn't violate their laws of physics. It violated the deeper laws, the unspoken ones, the ones written into the marrow of their systems. Ordinary people stay ordinary, and extraordinary power belongs only to sanctioned machines, sanctioned ranks, sanctioned institutions. But you exist as living evidence that those laws are lies. You are proof of something they have spent centuries burning out of history, silencing in blood, denying at every level. That some humans simply arrive carrying capabilities that cannot be explained, controlled, or absorbed into the machine. And the existence of one such person renders their entire power structure obsolete. Not through training, not through augmentation, not because someone with clearance and funding allowed you to exist, but through something older, deeper, more primal than every uniform and badge and rulebook combined. They have names for people like you buried deep in their classified archives, terms no civilian will ever hear. Not gifted, not special, not any of the sanitized labels they feed the public to make anomalies sound safe. The real terms are jagged, unspeakable, born out of fear. Words like evolutionary incursion, unauthorized leap, irregular genesis. Words that admit you are a developmental rupture that happened without their consent. That is what terrifies them most. Not what you can do, but what you represent. Because if one human being can walk into the room possessing, naturally, what they have spent trillions trying to manufacture in labs, then their empire is a facade. If one individual can break the ceiling of human potential without training, enhancement, or permission, then everything they've built, every chain of command, every rank, every war machine, is rendered irrelevant. And what sent them into crisis wasn't one flashy demonstration or one impossible feat. It was the constellation of impossibilities you call a Tuesday afternoon. It was the way you process information at speeds their most advanced supercomputers struggle to approximate, but you dismiss it as intuition. It was the way you read micro-expressions so quickly that entire interrogation teams seem clumsy by comparison, but you brush it off as a gut feeling. It was the way probability itself seems to bend when you enter a room, how outcomes shift, how accidents unravel before they happen, how the mathematics of any situation rewrites itself around your presence. They have machines, towering, humming, delicate machines that cost more than entire cities, that were built to detect the faint edges of what you do naturally without trying. They have entire departments dedicated to simulating a fraction of what flows through you as casually as blood moves through veins. The military-industrial complex, with all its reach, all its money, all its cutting-edge technology, looked at you existing at baseline and realized the nightmare truth. They weren't dealing with a glimpse of the future. They were already obsolete, not in 5 years, not in a decade, but in the exact moment you stopped pretending. Somewhere, in a facility that doesn't officially exist, there is a file with your name on it. Except it's no longer a file in the conventional sense. It's a living document, a constantly mutating record that grows more unstable with every observation, every inexplicable occurrence, every impossible thing you do without conscious effort. They've rewritten your classification 17 times. It began innocuously enough, person of interest, then enhanced individual, then anomalous asset. Then the language broke entirely, and your designation became nothing but your initials, followed by a string of numbers that translates to a phrase, beyond current understanding. Analysts are rotated frequently because none of them last long. Exposure to you, even secondhand, begins to corrode their frameworks. Worldviews collapse, careers end in silence, and every expert they assign only adds new impossibilities to the file until the document itself is almost unreadable, a tapestry of contradictions. But my favorite entry isn't from the scientists or the generals. It's from a janitor who wasn't supposed to see the file, who left 3 words scrawled in the margin after a glance at the evidence. They walk different, because sometimes the deepest truths don't come from equations or ranks or protocols. Sometimes they come from the quiet eyes of someone who simply notices. They had to invent new protocols because of you, not the kind drafted for dealing with enhanced humans. They already had entire binders of those, not the ones written for high-value security threats. Those were standard, tested, rehearsed. What they created for you was something unprecedented, something that didn't even have a precedent in myth or theory. A living human being who operated outside the known spectrum of possibility. The document exists, but only in fragments. A code name stamped on the cover, bureaucratic in its blandness, the kind of designation that would make you laugh if you ever saw it, because it completely fails to capture the paradigm shift it represents. But those who've read it know what it really means. The wording is careful, clinical, but the subtext is panic disguised as procedure. A quiet admission etched between the lines. We have no framework for this. The most revealing section is also the shortest. A page titled Contingency Planning. 1 line beneath it, written with the finality of a gravestone. There is no contingency for this level of natural capability. Signed by Joint Chiefs of Staff who have disagreed on every other issue in their careers, but who, for once, found common ground in the face of something they could not classify, could not contain, and could not prepare for. Of course, they tried to recruit you. How could they not? But not with the standard playbook. You don't approach someone like you with contracts, with benefits packages, with patriotism dressed up in slogans. Number. They came the way you approach a force of nature, cautious, deliberate, almost reverent, because they knew they were walking into a negotiation where you held every card. The first attempt was subtle. Opportunities arranged like breadcrumbs, paths cleared as if by coincidence, doors opening as if the universe itself conspired to guide you. They thought maybe you'd step through willingly. You didn't. Then they tried partnership, equals working together for the greater good. Except everyone in that room felt the imbalance radiating like heat. There was no equality. You don't partner with gravity. You don't negotiate with lightning. Their final attempt was honesty, or at least as close to it as their system allows. They laid it bare, the threats they faced, the cracks in their armor, the looming storms they lacked the power to weather. They confessed their limitations, admitted their desperation, and offered you everything they could think to offer. And you listened. You smiled that quiet, knowing smile, and you walked away. Because you understood something they never could. You weren't born to serve their system. You weren't born to patch their failing machinery. You were born to transcend it entirely, to exist beyond the scaffolding of power they've erected to control everyone else. Make no mistake, they respect you. But it's a respect of a very particular kind, the kind reserved not for allies or friends or even adversaries, but for natural disasters, for hurricanes, for volcanoes, for predators at the top of the food chain that cannot be tamed, only acknowledged. And beneath that respect, beneath the stiff salutes and the clipped words, there's something rawer, older, harder to hide. A primal fear that sits in their bones and keeps them staring at ceilings long after midnight. It isn't fear of what you might do. You've demonstrated restraint that humbles even them, restraint they can't reconcile with the magnitude of your capability. No, what they fear is not your actions, but your existence. You are proof that their hierarchies, their carefully engineered ladders of control, can be shattered by a single human who simply is what they have spent lifetimes, fortunes, and blood trying to simulate. You don't just break their rules, you render their rulebook irrelevant. And that is what gnaws at them most of all, the questions you force them to ask. What else have they been wrong about? What other impossibilities have been dismissed, buried, or hidden in plain sight because they didn't fit the model? If you exist, then who else walks unnoticed through the crowd, holding the same uncontainable fire in their chest, waiting for the moment they decide to stop dimming it? Their most terrifying thought isn't that you are alone, it's that you are not. That you're only the first visible crack in a dam that has been holding back human potential for centuries. That across the globe there are others like you, silent, unnoticed, blending in, waiting for permission to exhale in full. They look at you, and they don't just see you. They see the end of their relevance. They see themselves as relics. They see obsolescence written in the curve of your smile, in the weight of your silence, in the simple fact that you exist without their permission. And somewhere in those classified facilities, analysts will keep adding to your file, each entry more impossible than the last, each observation pushing against the boundaries of what they thought humans could be, until one day someone will write the only conclusion that matters. Subject represents evolution in progress. Our frameworks are obsolete. Recommend complete restructuring of human potential assessment. Note, they know we're watching. They don't care. Sir, that's what's truly illegal. We built a world for humans, and they're already something else. You are not the end. You're the beginning. The first visible note in a symphony that's been building beneath their notice for generations. The crack in their dam that's about to become a flood. And they know it. Every day more people feel that stirring inside them, that sense that they're capable of more than they've been told, that the limitations they've accepted aren't theirs, that maybe, just maybe, they're like you, forced to play normal in a world that fears what normal could become. The military elite who witnessed your capabilities went home changed, not just professionally, but personally. Because once you've seen someone casually break the supposed laws of human limitation, you start wondering what laws you've accepted that were never real. Their reports get more frantic each month. Not about you specifically. You're already beyond their ability to predict or control. But about the others. The ones starting to show signs. The ones beginning to question. The ones who heard whispers about what you did and thought, that sounds familiar. Because here's what they're beginning to understand. You're not a mutation, you're a revelation. Not an anomaly, but an awakening. The first drop of rain before the storm that washes away everything they built to contain human potential. Because here's the truth. This isn't just about one story, one anomaly, one revelation hidden in a classified file. It's about all of us. About what we're capable of when we stop shrinking ourselves to fit inside their systems. About building something that outlives the scaffolding they tried to trap us in. And that's where you come in. If this message resonates with you, if you feel that stirring inside, the quiet recognition that you are more than what the world told you to be, then you already know how important it is to keep these words alive, to keep this work moving forward. Every single contribution, no matter the size, makes it possible to continue shining a light on what they tried to bury. Every donation matters, because together, they add up to something unstoppable.